Hi, and welcome back. This is my second newsletter. This is February 23rd of 2017, and just following up on my last video of obedience versus behavior and what you're really looking for when trying to train your dog. Um, kind of expand upon that, uh, you can and can't use obedience to fix behavior. Strictly food-based training, not going to get you anywhere with behavior. Your average, like not average, but your very friendly dogs and stuff like that, like yeah, they'll do the food training, they'll do the commands, they just won't do them reliably. At least not to a level that a trainer like myself would say like, oh yeah, that's acceptable for me. But I don't want to tell a dog sit 5 times before they sit. I want the dog to sit because they know they're supposed to do it, or I said so. All my dogs are trained to automatically sit as a default when we go walking. Even if I don't say heel, they walk in heel position. It's just default. Um, if I have them off leash and I'm walking, they know to stay around me. That's just all default behavior that I've trained into them um, using both a balance of aversives and food. So, how can we use obedience for behavior, or at least minor behavior problems? And I just had a consultation the other day, and I knocked, saw the dog. The dog was a little uneasy, and I forgot to ask beforehand if the dog was human aggressive, and she said a mix of both. So I was like, all right, well, let me suit up just in case, because if the dog's human aggressive, I need to see where the aggression is coming from. So I suit up, come back, um, I walk in, the dog's like barking, whatever, and I go to touch him, and nothing, like eating carrot, didn't bite, nothing like that. So I was like, all right. So then, like as I'm putting pressure on him, I start to see some uneasiness, but nothing that I was like, yeah, this dog's aggressive. So I asked why did they say that? He'd apparently like snapped a couple of times, and everything seemed to be based around nerves. Like he was like a nervous, kind of insecure dog. And in my mind, I go, okay, someone just comes out of nowhere, startles him, his nerves are on edge because he has his brain's kind of overstimulated. So then he just reacts. So not what I would call an aggressive dog. He's a nervous dog, and he's simply giving boundaries to anybody that just comes into his space. So as we're talking, um, you know, they had seen my last video, and they're like, it made a lot of sense. So as I'm asking them questions, I go, this case is actually different. This is actually a case where I would use obedience to settle to fix the problem. Even though I was just talking about like obedience doesn't fix behavior, but the difference is the style of obedience we're gonna do. We're gonna do very solid, reliable obedience, and how it's gonna help them is when you're using aversives like electronic collar and you're using them appropriately, it settles and pacifies the brain. It slows it down. So he's not living on edge, or he's not like overstimulated. Like he could be at a store and without uh, good solid training, like he's gonna be a little bit more excitable. Even if it's friendly excitement, that friendly excitement is what can lead to a snap if someone just comes in and steps into his space. So with tightening up our obedience, because they've already done obedience in the past with an electronic collar, um, tightening it up to the point where the dog knows what it's supposed to do and he has focus, and his brain's not all over the place, should settle his nerves. So that if someone comes into his space, it's not reaction because he's just tense. He's like, oh, okay, like, he just kind of accepts it. We'll, of course, work around things and just make sure that he doesn't do that. We got to test it, but I'm pretty confident that just good obedience will actually fix that problem because it's minor behavior. It's not like he was aggressive. If he was aggressive, it'd be a totally different approach. Obedience would still play a part of it, but it wouldn't be what I would use to actually fix the biting or the aggression problem itself, right? So minor behavior problems, and even in some cases, more serious ones, we can use uh, electronic collar based obedience to settle a lot of things. And if it was a more severe a dog or case, if I make the importance of heel or automatic sit so ingrained in that dog's head that when he sees a dog, he doesn't want to break sit position, he's not going to explode. Now, in that case, maybe he is truly dog aggressive and the owner doesn't want to do a behavior program. They're just like, you know what, I want to do this shorter program. And I go, okay, well, I can't make your dog friendly in that amount of time, but we can at least not have them exploding, and getting them to hold their nerves and stuff. And then teaching the owner how to control certain situations, by giving space or moving to the side so that the dog is not so stimulated, right? So, yes and no, we can use obedience to fix behavior stuff, but not all behavior stuff. And of course, it has to be obedience, balanced obedience. If you're going to use in food, fine. If you're going to incorporate it, I don't like to personally because for your average dog owner, it's just too much stuff to be handling. They got their food in one hand, they got their electronic collar in the other hand, they got the leash, they got the dog. Too many things to think about. I like to simplify it. Dogs are very simple animals. It's not complicated. Humans make it complicated with all these theories and stuff. It's not. It's very simple. It's all about discipline and structure. Is all it is. So I have an example, and I have the video down below. Crosby was a Wheaton Terrier mix that I worked with about a year and a half ago. When I first saw him, he was all over the place. Like I had to like yell to talk to the people, and they were just like 6 feet across from me. So I took him, and they had him on a Star Mark collar, and I did a couple of corrections to the Star Mark collar, and then I just saw it agitated him more. So I was like, all right, well, this isn't going to work. So I go to the Caesar method, and I use the poke, or the touch, as he calls it, to help de-escalate him. And he did redirect because he was so high anxiety and so tensed up that he did try to bite me, but not because he was being aggressive, simply because he was so stimulated. When he felt that touch, he couldn't help but let that go, and that whole like just like a jump. So I de-escalated him, and you'll hear me in the video saying like, you see how he's calmer now and he's holding. It's because of the pokes. Like you'll hear me say that in the video. So in what you see is actually him after I had worked with them for like a couple of minutes, just so I could talk to them. So that's the beginning clip, and that was like maybe a quarter of how he was when he first came out. We did electronic collar training. I was like, that's how we're gonna go about it. And with a case like that, aversives like prong collar and Star Mark collar can be too physical for the dog. It's too confrontational. It's too much conflict. Too physical. The yanking and stuff. And if not done appropriately, could, in my opinion, make the dog worse, right? And not to say that you couldn't use those tools at all, but because there's other trainers that I've seen use them, but they use them in a different fashion, and I can see that working. It's just not my style. So we did electronic collar, and from first class to second class, he came out totally different dog, much calmer, much more calmer, very passive, very relaxed, and you'll see him walking by Lexi. And when he saw her, he didn't even react. Like I was trying to film, and I was like, "Oh, let's see what we get," because I was expecting. I thought he was going to be a case that we're working on a lot to get him through that stuff. And from one class to the next, he made a big 180. It doesn't mean he was completely fixed in that one class. We had stuff that we worked on, throughout our sessions, but we got a big, big chunk of his reactivity and his anxiousness under control within that one class. And it was simply through electronic collar. But it's not the tool, because he was an anxious dog. You can't zap him for being anxious, right? That would just make him more anxious. It's the way we used the collar and taught him how to walk appropriately on the leash and gave him direction and gave him discipline and corrected him for things that he was able like to learn, like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. So when I'm outside and I get anxious about what's going on, I have this to focus on. And if I'm focusing on this doesn't matter to me. And then in time, he's holding his nerves, he's holding that anxiety, he's controlling it because he knows he has something at hand that he needs to do. And he overrides his anxiety. And then in time, his brain goes, you know what, like this whole time I was anxious about all this stuff, but now that I'm going through it, nothing's wrong. Nothing's bad's happening. And then he kind of builds his confidence and gets over it. So with him, we used obedience. Like we did correct some behavioral things. Like I think a couple classes in, like he was still having the occasional explosion in the elevator. I think was what it was, which is very common because the door is open and they're anticipating a dog's going to be on the other side, so they're just like loading. So then we just did a couple of things and we were addressing that in a different fashion, and then he turned out really well. He made a big change in his behavior, and it was through electronic collar, which a lot of people would be apprehensive about using because they're thinking punishment, they're thinking it's inhumane. It's like one of the most humane. I'm sorry, one of the most humane tools you can use when used appropriately. It's the psychology that's being applied to the tool that gets these results. Right? I know a lot of trainers that use electronic collar, and I know a lot of trainers that I disagree with the way they use electronic collar. And I get clients that have come from trainers that use electronic collar, and they'll tell me stuff, and I'm like, in my opinion, that's wrong. That's incorrect. That's not how I would use the electronic collar. Um, so there, here we are with obedience and behavior. It can be used to alleviate some behavior problems, minor ones. Some cases like that, like Crosby. Um, but it always does play a factor when we're doing behavior rehabilitation. It's just not the first and foremost thing I do, right? So if I have a dog that's biting, obedience is not going to fix the biting. Like even if I do electronic color obedience, it's not going to fix the biting. Like that's a totally different ball game. Um, but um, but yes, I think that wraps it up for this video. Hopefully you learned something today, and if you have a dog with behavior problems and you've been through a lot of positive reinforcement trainers and it's just not working and they keep promising you like it'll take a couple of years. It does not take a couple of years. At max for me, the second or third week is some dogs will, like at that point we see the change, but a lot of cases from the first to the second class through electronic collar and the way I was taught how to use it fixes a lot of problems. So um, that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them. Please share this video if you found this information helpful. And we have Hugo. He's the 6.5-month-old pitty puppy, and he's up for adoption through Canine for Keeps. I've posted his link in my newsletter, or you can go to canineforkeeps.org and take a look at him. And tune in next time. This is Jesse with Canine Perspective signing off. Take care.